Hello, I'm coming from my studio today for a very particular reason. I'm going to read an essay by Dave Hickey called Romancing the Looky-Loos. And it's an essay that I give my students usually every year to instill a participatory rather than spectatorship model of inhabiting culture or working through culture. The essay sets up this argument between spectatorship, which is Looky-Loos, and participation. And they're two very different things. So how to define a Looky-Loos? Well, a Looky-Loos is someone who goes to view a house that's on sale, but has no intention of buying. They're there just to look. You could take another current example, a very relevant example, perhaps one of the reasons I'm doing this now. Instagram, in a way, fosters Looky-Loos rather than participation. In recent years, I've been a critic or someone who is nostalgic about artists coming out of art college and setting up their own spaces and doing really dumb, stupid, reckless things, breaking art, being a counterculture to what's already out there in the mainstream. Kind of an element of hate, envy, anger. But out of those things, participation takes place. Because we have something like Instagram now, there's no real desire or ambition or necessity really to do that anymore. To be physically committed to art in that way, to take risks, to put your own body on the line for art. The thing we do now is really, set up, the thing. I'm not going to talk about Instagram. I'm actually not going to let it subjugate this. But it really comes out of that, that there is an absence of participation now. It's all virtual, NFTs, all this kind of stuff that has become quite boring very quickly. So something like Instagram would be a space in which institutions can control very easily, and artists get pulled into it really, and there's an element of just satisfaction in it, but there's no real risk or anxiety in it. So Hickey sets this up. Now, why have I thought about this essay? This essay was written in the 90s. It's in a collection of essays. Here we are. Now I'm in my studio, so the lighting is not great. It's in this a collection of essays called 𝚃𝙷𝙸𝙽𝙽. If you don't have it, buy it. It's brilliant. And the subtitle to this is Essays on Art and Democracy. And Hickey is a writer, is a contrarian. He's someone who you could call someone like Jerry Saltz a contrarian as well, but I don't have the same respect for Saltz as I do for Hickey. I think Hickey's a better thinker. I think he's a better writer. He's not so embedded in the art world. He's always had one foot out, a kind of detached looking. That he started, writing some fiction, but really he was part of kind of the Rolling Stone magazine brigade, like someone like Hunter S. Thompson, that kind of generation of writers who are writing on the road, listening to music. He's part of that generation. And it's not that I agree with everything he says, but I think he has been a very big influence on how I write and think about art. As you see, here's some of his books I've collected over the years. Pirates and Farmers. That's quite a recent one. Here's an older one. Perfect, right? Quite a recent one. Here's 25 women essays on their art. So he's very much about desire. I would say I would define Hickey as someone who puts desire over identity. Okay, so we're all caught up in identity now, identity politics, and this defines us. Whereas Hickey is very much more interested in desire, and a kind of, once again, he's kind of in the Sontag camp, a kind of anti-intellectualization of art. That art is about experience, about the physical object. Now, I don't want to go on too much about this because I'm going to read this essay and it's going to take me a while. So last night, I watched A Star is Born, the most recent remake, starring Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper. And it's quite a moving movie. And it's I remember watching an earlier version of it as a kid with Kris Kristofferson and Barbara Streisand, and I think it had some kind of an effect on me. I haven't rewatched it at all, but I do remember it. And but the latest version, why it got me to think about this essay is funny, because in the film we have Bradley Cooper, who is a country western rock and roll star on the downward spiral. He's made it, he's a celebrity, he's famous. He drinks a lot, he's a drunk, he's disconnected from his audience. He goes to a bar, he sees the Lady Gaga character performing. She performs in French, a kind of burlesque in a drag queen bar, and he is re-enlivened. He's awoken. He's spellbound. He pursues her. A love story ensues, and then we get this friction between Cooper's character on the downward spiral and Lady Gaga's character on the upward trajectory. So we have this friction between the two. Bradley Cooper's character is brought back, I think, in this kind of participatory mode of thinking. He's back in a space where he's with someone who understands him as he is. There's a lot of this stuff going in the dialogue. There's a lot of this stuff about, Lady Gaga says in one part where she's becoming famous, I don't want you to take my talent away. Okay, this is not elaborated on, but what is the essence of that is that the presentation of the package of this Lady Gaga character has become detached from her talent, the thing that's inside of her voice coming from the inside out, but it's being packaged in a particular way that is making that invisible. It's actually erasing her talent, her realness. She also says to the Bradley Cooper character that when all these people are coming up asking for autographs or a picture, like, how can you bear that? They don't even know you, you, the real you. They see an image of you. Now, in the essay by Dave Hickey, and this is why the connection happened. The introduction to the essay is Dave Hickey on a bus in the 1970s. Okay, so it's a kind of a similar, my memory of the Kris Kristofferson movie is, it's set in the 70s. And you feel that the remake is kind of leaning on the Kris Kristofferson remake and Barbara Streisand remake. more than the other ones, of course, But so you have Dave Hickey and this Waylon Jennings. He's a country music rock star, but at this point in his career, he's becoming a pop star. He's becoming famous, and there's a beautiful part in the beginning of Hickey's essay where Waylon Jennings talks very philosophically about the difference between spectators and participants, and how he is being disconnected because as his fame is growing, as he's becoming more popular, the connection he has with this new audience, which isn't the audience that he grew up with, the audience that made him, the local bar, the people who knew him, the people who gave him the songs, gave him his voice, that these people in front of him, although there's more of them, they're less in tune with what he's saying, what he has to say. And he refers to these as Looky-Loos, people who spectate but don't participate. They don't put their own bodies on the line. They haven't given anything to his project, his voice. So yeah, that's so the connection with the movie is very pertinent, because in a way it's uncanny. Hickey's essay with A Star Is Born, and in our own culture now, like where Looky-Loos culture is everywhere, especially something like Instagram. I'm of an older generation now, and I'm not going to be able to break things as much as I used to when I emerged out of art school in the beginning. So it's up to the younger generation to do it, to show the older generation what is happening now, what you can do with art now. But it's not happening because all that desire, that's what Dave Hickey's thesis is, desire. All that desire has been diluted through kind of the proliferation, dissemination of images online, to the point it has reached on something like Instagram, that there's a kind of a valve, a desire valve in a way, or anxiety valve, which is letting off all this kind of pent up anger, envy, desire, lust, love, and it's always been kind of everyone's just too satisfied in some way to go out and just do something out of the basic need and desire to do it. We don't have that anymore. Well, I don't see it manifest on the art scene anymore. We have an older generation of artists from spaces, really, that have grown up. They haven't really. We don't see spaces in Dublin, artists from spaces, or elsewhere. They're not going to do things differently. That is shocking. And it goes back to this idea that Hickey is known for, the difference between beauty and the beautiful. So the beautiful is a thing we see every day, that it, in a way, it controls us. It keeps us satisfied. It's the beautiful face. You could even say on Instagram there's an element of the beautiful there that people put up. They filter their lives through this thing, and everything is okay, and everything is on par. Okay, everything is flat. The beauty is something very different, and Hickey relates it to art and culture in particular, that the beauty destabilizes things. So Helen of Troy destabilized the whole of civilization in the Trojan War. That relationship between Paris and Helen of Troy. So beauty destabilizes. The beautiful just keeps things controlled and level. And that's what I feel sometimes when I dip into to Instagram, that there's a kind of a flatness, there's a leveling off. There's an institutionalization of things, and control. So, yeah, I'm going to leave it there because I have to read this book. I don't know how I'm going to do this. Here's the book. I think I'll just read it from here, and I'll leave this. Listen, I'll leave some of these books here spread out so there's something to look at more than the pegboard. I bought this in Strand Books, which I think is now gone, in New York, in 2011. It was $15. It's beautiful. I might do another podcast on this, because it's kind of, yeah. Anyway, we'll leave it there. So I'm going to read from this here. Let's see if I can. So that's 4 essays on beauty. Yeah, I'll leave that there like that, okay? So bear with me in this reading. Okay. Romancing the Looky-Loos. It is a cloudy spring night in the mid-1970s. Waylon Jennings and I are sitting in the shotgun seats at the front of his bus, slouched down with our heels up on the chrome rail, watching the ongoing highway between the toes of our boots. We are leaving Atlanta after a tumultuous concert, about 2 weeks into Waylon's breakout concert tour. I am along to write a piece for a magazine about Waylon's ongoing transformation into a pop star. Although at this point in the tour, Waylon himself is somewhat less than sanguine about his rising status. Not that he's doing anything to deter it, he's just not particularly enjoying it. Quote by Waylon. They think you just get up there and sing your songs, he is saying, addressing the highway. They think it's just a one-way deal, but it's not like that at all, because you start out playing for people who are just like you. That's the only place you can. You play for people who come from where you come from. They seek you out in the little clubs because they understand what you're doing, so you feel like you're doing it for them. And if you go wrong in these clubs, you know it immediately, and maybe you want to go wrong. That's your option, but you know it when you do it. Then one day, you're not playing for people like you anymore. You look out there like I did tonight and realize that you're playing for people who want to be like you. And you can't trust these people because to them, whatever you do, that's you. And that's cool. Which will be okay, except even though all these people want to be like you, you don't know who you are anymore, because it was the people in those little clubs that gave you that understanding in the first place. God knows where they are tonight, sitting at home probably, pissed off at me, listening to Willie Nelson records. So what do you do? I ask. Waylon shrugs and grins. Right now, Hoss, he says, it's completely out of my hands. I'm looking at those people out there, but I don't know what I'm seeing, and they're watching me too. But they don't know what they're looking at. My best guess is that they keep on loving me till they start hating me or their 𝚂𝙾𝙳𝙸𝙾𝙳 duds wear out, because they already hate me a little just because I'm me and they're them. That's why they always go on about how talented you are, because they hate you. Because if they had this talent, they would be you. The fact that you've worked like a dog, lived like a horse thief, and broke your mama's heart to do whatever you do, that don't mean diddly squat. To them, it's talent. Supposedly you got it, and supposedly they don't. So eventually you're bound to disappoint them. My real people, they get jealous because their girlfriend thinks I'm cute and try to kick my butt. They get envious because singing pays better than roofing and try to kick my butt. But basically they understand that I do this job for them, that I'm up on stage with a Telecaster, sweating in the lights, coughing in the smoke, and trying to hear the monitor. That's they're sitting out there all cool and comfortable with a bottle of beer and a bowl of peanuts. So when this all blows up, I'll just go back and do that. Find out if I'm still me. A month or so later, I find myself standing at the bar in CBGB's on the Bowery with Lester Bangs and David Johansen. We're listening to 𝚃𝙷𝙸𝙽𝙬, who are playing their official teen anthem. What this world needs is a lot more girls. What this world needs is a lot less boys. What this world needs is a lot more noise. Noise ensues. When the noise subsides, Johansen tilts his head and nods theatrically towards the door. Lester and I turn to watch as a limousine load of uptown trendies files slowly into the back of the club, setting their coats on their shoulders and waving smoke away from their nostrils with frantic little gestures. "Who dat?" Lester says. "The beginning of the end," says David Joe. "Spectators." My dad called them Looky-Loos. He would come home from playing in some bar or listening to someone else play, and Mom would ask, how was the crowd? If those in attendance were not up to his standards, he would say, Looky-Loos. Or sometimes he would just mutter civilians, which meant the same thing. We all knew what he meant. Civilians were non-participants. People who did not live the life. People with no real passion for what was going on. They were just looking. They paid their dollar at the door, but they contributed nothing to the occasion, offered no confirmation or denial that you could work with or around or against. With spectators, as 𝚂𝙗𝙗 put it, it's a one-way deal, and in the world I grew up in, the whole idea was not to be one of them and to avoid, insofar as possible, being spectated by any of them because it was demeaning. You just didn't do it, and you used the word spectator as a term of derision. Not as bad as folk singer, of course, but still a serious insult. Even so, it wasn't something we discussed or even thought about, since the possibility of any of us spectating or being spectated was fairly remote. It is, however, something worth thinking about today, since with the professionalization of the art world and the dissolution of the underground cultures that once fed into it, the distinction between spectators and participants is dissolving as well. The distinction is critical to the practice of art in a democracy, however, because spectators invariably align themselves with authority. They have neither the time nor the inclination to make decisions. They just love the winning side, the side with the chic building, the gaudy doctorates, and the star-studded cast. They seek out spectacles whose value is confirmed by the normative blessing of institutions and corporations. In these venues, they derive sanctioned pleasure or virtue from an accredited source, and this makes them feel secure, more a part of things. Participants, on the other hand, do not like this feeling. They lose interest at the moment of accreditation, always assuming there is something better out there, something brighter and more desirable, something more in tune with their own agendas. And they may be wrong, of course. The truth may indeed reside in the vision of full professors and corporate moguls, but true participants persist in not believing this. They continue looking. Thus, while spectators must be lured, participants just appear, looking for the new thing, the thing they always wanted to see, or the old thing that might be seen anew. And having seen it, they seek to invest that thing with new value. They do this simply by showing up. They do it with their body language and casual conversation, with their written commentary, if they are so inclined, and their disposable income, if it falls to hand. Because participants, unlike spectators, do not covertly hate the things they desire. Participants want their views to prevail, so they lobby for the embodiment of what they lack. The impact of these participatory investments is tangible across the whole range of cultural production. It is more demonstrable, however, in live arts, live music, theatre and art than in industrial arts like publishing, film and recording. Because in the live arts, participatory investment, as it accumulates, increases the monetary value of the product. You increase the value of an artwork just by buying it if you are a participant. Thus, you will probably pay more for the next work by the artist you buy. You do the same if you recruit all your friends to go listen to a band in a bar. If all your friends show up and have a good time, you will almost certainly pay more at the door the next time the band plays. But that's the idea, to increase the social value of the things you love. And the extra bucks are a small price to pay. They are next to nothing really compared to the value of forming a new eccentric community, or compared to the pleasure of having one's views prevail. One of the things I feel best about in my life is the tiny part I played in convincing the artist and repertoire people at Warner Brothers Records to sign George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelic to their label. I mean, all that fun and funk born upon the mothership, zooming out across the Republic, and even though I only contributed to the talk around the office, it makes me happy just to know that I participated. This sort of pleasure, however, is totally alien to the mindset of spectatorship. The butterfly effects of cultural eccentricity are of no interest to spectators. They either consume or they critique. They are all right with the way things are, or they know exactly what's wrong with it. Incest wishes, capitalism, both, etc. Beyond the hegemony of corporate and institutional consensus, however, beyond the purview of uncannily lifelike blockbusters like Jurassic Park and the Whitney Biennale, everything that grows in the domain of culture, that acquires constituencies and enters the realm of public esteem, does so through the accumulation of participatory investment by people who show up. No painting is ever sold, nor essay written, nor banned book, nor exhibition scheduled that is not the consequence of previous social interaction, of gossip, body language, fashion dish, and telephone chatter. Nothing transpires that does not float upon the ephemeral substrata of word of mouth, on the validation of schmooze. Everyone who participates knows this, and knows as well that it doesn't cost a dime. You just show up, Behave as you wish, say what you will, and live with the fleeting, often unexpected consequences of your behaviour. At this bedrock level, the process through which works of art are socialised looks less like a conspiracy than a slumber party. The whole process, however, presumes the existence of artists who are comfortable with this tiny local social activity, who are at ease with the gradual lateral acquisition of constituencies and understand that the process can take place anywhere and, if successful, command attention everywhere. The musical vogue of Prince and his entourage, of the Allman Brothers Band and their compatriots, and of Seattle grunge testify to the efficacy of this process. It only requires artists who would rather socialise their work among their peers, horizontally, at the risk of Daddy's ire, than institutionalise it vertically, in hopes of Daddy's largesse. These, I fear, are fewer and farther between. To cite the case at hand, I was visiting a group of young artists in Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago. They were obviously bright, ambitious people who were doing interesting work. Unfortunately, they could hardly speak, could not even converse like human beings, for sputtering their anger and outrage at the fucking Los Angeles Times, which had refused to provide advance coverage for their forthcoming, totally bitching underground rave performance event. And, silly moi, my first thought was, why would you want it in the Los Angeles Times? In my vernacular, underground meant just that, and rave performance event meant dope, nudity, and loud noises. Demanding publicity from the Times for such an event seemed about one step above from asking your mom to bring her friends from the garden club. But I didn't say this, nor did I quote Waylon and suggest, I don't think Hank done it this way. I said, hey, it's a rave. It's supposed to be fun. Invite your friends and word will get around. They just looked at me, kept on looking, until one of them said, but all our friends are artists. We want real people. Thus I entered a brave new world, and all I could think was, what have we done? Because there I was, face to face with a generation of well-educated and expensively trained young artists whose extended tenure in art schools appended to the art world had totally divorced them from any social reality beyond it. The friends they drank beer with after sophomore lit, the people they dated in high school, the guys they played soccer with were but fading memories, lost to them now out in the hazy world of bourgeois America. Now they were artists in the art world, and their art world job was to make art. And my art world job, they implied, was romancing the Looky-Loos on their behalf, now that the Los Angeles Times had screwed them over. And maybe that is my job these days. Maybe it's just old-fashioned of me to think that young artists should bring their own stuff with them into the art world and bring their own friends as well, simply because democratic institutions, even frivolous ones like the art world, respond to constituencies of people, not objects. That's why I still endorse Peter Sheldal's advice on how to become an artist. Quote, you move to a city, you hang out in bars, you form a gang, turn it into a scene, and turn that into a movement. End quote. Then I would suggest, when your movement hits the museum, abandon it. Your demure emblem now adorns the smooth state, resides in the domain of normative expression, its status greatly magnified, and its rich social contextuality effectively sterilized. Whatever happy contingencies flutter around it disperse as it departs society and enters the culture, where it must necessarily mean less, but to a lot more people. It's spectator food, now scholar fodder, so you may safely stick a fork in it. Tell yourself you've won, or go to your room. In recent decades, however, changes in American institutional life have made this scenario exponentially more difficult to pursue. First, Richard Nixon's expansion of the National Endowment for the Arts in the 1970s has, over the years, effectively transformed the institutional art world into government-regulated industry dedicated to maintaining a strict consensus of virtue. Second, the extended adolescence imposed on art students by lengthy tenures in graduate schools has effectively isolated them from the peers among whom they might discover their true new constituencies. Third, the massive consequences of Frampton Comes Alive in the record industry and Star Wars in the movie industry have instituted a reign of consensus in the world of commercial entertainment, as well a quest for consensus of desire dedicated to producing blockbusters that please everyone every time. So young artists find themselves confronted with two smooth juggernauts, one dedicated to a regulated consensus of virtue, the other dedicated to a calculated consensus of desire, neither dedicated to the more elusive and redeeming consensus of virtue and desire. Nor is there any reasons to suspect that this will change beyond my wishing that it would, and what do I know? Maybe young artists like the art world the way it is. Maybe they are willing to undergo extensive indoctrination in order to adapt to it. And if they do adapt, well, maybe the art world will truck in Looky-Loos for their performances. I don't think so. But it could happen. If it does, the idea of art as a social practice may be declared officially dead, along with the idea that the practice of art in a democracy under optimal conditions is a game played by voluntary participants within the textures of the larger world. A game without rules, coaches, referees, or, God help us, spectators. Without that liberating ideal, we will be left with a ritualized cultural exchange in which artists and objects selected by professionals submit themselves to the vagaries of casual public spectatorship in officially sanctioned venues. We will divide the world into artists who have been trained in special schools, spectators who will admire the consequences of this training, and salaried support workers who will select the product and deliver it to the market. In the popular arts, these spectators will support the artist by buying a ticket or a CD or a paperback. In the fine arts, spectators will buy tickets too, but the ticket will not be construed as support for the artist, but as support for the arts. We know that one. Which is to say, as a contribution to the salaries of the support workers who facilitate our public spectatorship. That's brilliant. With the suppression of wicked commerce, then fine artists will be required to support themselves otherwise than by their work, and the practice will be restricted to those who can. This world would be fine too, and possible, if art were nothing more than the production of sanctioned professionals, but it is more and less as well. It is a mode of social discourse, a participatory republic, an accumulation of small, fragile social occasions that provide the binding agent of fugitive communities. It is made in small places and flourishes in environments only slightly less intimate. So even if your art ends up in a museum, even if your underground rave performance event ends up in the Los Angeles Times, even if your band ends up playing coliseums, you may be assured that what is being glorified in public splendor is just a residue, a mere simulacrum from which disinterested spectators may infer the experience of participants. This is why those works of art that enter the public domain without participator constituencies are instantly recognizable as pale impostors, as institutional furniture purporting to represent constituencies that have yet to materialize. Waylon put it best that night on the bus. When I play a little club, he said, I'm playing songs for people I know. Up there in the lights in front of a stadium crowd, I'm just playing Waylon for strangers. And my battery is about to die, so that's enough for now. Thank you.